Здравствуйте. Тема...
Let me greet you all. The topic of today's seminar is my teaching on God, the universal action of God. In this topic, I would like to examine the principle of the action of God, namely when God acts the initial moment of time. In doing so, an element of infinite action is created. That is, if a person who wants to receive the effect of direct control to be able to receive in this technology the action that is immediately infinite, then, in this element of control, one must examine, first of all, how God originally accomplishes this action from himself. That is, the action must be, first of all, directed and at the same time infinite. To do this, in this technology, one must examine the totality of a particular action to a specific person and the action immediately to everyone. It turns out that, when we want to examine just the applied meaning of these methods of control, we must first examine the structure of our own soul. When the soul of man begins to implement the action together with the Creator, with the one God, when this action takes place simultaneously, that is, God acts simultaneously with man, man acting correctly acts infinitely, because God's action is infinite. In this structure of control, it is necessary to examine, first of all, the element of such control when a person, through personal efforts, creating his own system of control, can convert the super-complex or particular control system precisely into such an action. In this case, we mean that the system of complex actions is also an action of the infinite level. Therefore, when we talk about these methods of control, we must examine that process which in the soul of man, any process which originates from the soul of man and from the soul of God. This is the correct process. If a man performs even some everyday actions or controls using the complex technologies of macro-salvation, these actions must also be co-directional. That is, a man must obtain the same control as God shows and as God acts practically in any system and in any situation. In this regard, in this control system, first of all, it is necessary to examine how God acts in general from the very beginning. When He structures His own action, it immediately becomes infinite. To achieve this, it is necessary to examine the spiritual structure of God. When God makes control coming from Himself, but going primarily to people. Any system at the fundamental level of the world operates from one level to another, from the similar to the similar. When you begin to receive control from God personally, it is necessary to examine this technology. That signal or that information which comes to you personally is macro-creative, because you perceived it personally. You have already a personal responsibility for making the situation and information macro-creative for everyone. In the area of technologies of control, a simple level is made. Some filter is put in place. Any information coming to you immediately has a macro signal, which indicates that a level of macro creation is coming to everyone. Thus, all diseases can in fact be treated practically, immediately. Here we speak about the following. You can enter the area where there is practically no disease, exactly in the level of control. You immediately enter the area of receiving accuracy of knowledge where there are no diseases. Synchronizing with the action of God, you receive control that becomes the norm. Here we have the transition to the level of a norm. This is a personal relationship with God. God gives only macro-salvation. As soon as you enter this level of control, you in any case receive the norm, because the action of God is there. I mean universal action. Because God originally acts in the local place in His physical body. He still acts macro-creatively. If you follow how the signal goes to some specific place, you can receive the norm at the same place. And in control, when you act this way, you can immediately pass information to all people. When you try to pass information to all people immediately, your soul becomes clear, bright. This becomes precisely such a level of peace around you that the light materializes immediately for everyone. You don't have to convert the control structure into a logical level or make some technology. The most important is to show that your soul shines. It shines with the knowledge of universal life, eternal life and general, universal salvation. When we examine such methods, when it is a question of resurrection, universal resurrection, it is precisely the elimination of the souls of those who know or strive to know this technology that causes the lack of that reality that death generally exists. Man becomes already alive or ceases to become ill, or disease in general does not exist. Here it is a question of a radical level of control when the soul of man, having taken a specific level of obligations or control of the action for the level of striving for the action of universal salvation, accomplishes independently the same tasks as God shows and does. Then people are really able to develop for eternity. To have this information already now, that they will develop eternally and have all the technologies of eternal development. In doing so, when people logically know that there is a level of control, when people use the current technology of control to make an eternal system of development, it turns out that man is already now able to understand immediately that he has already mastered the technologies of exactly eternal development. You see, originally God faced the same task. Being in the physical body of man, simply man, he nevertheless builds the same task for subsequent development. It turns out that man is in similar conditions, and here it suffices to know the technology which will enable him to resolve personally the issues of just eternal development. You see, generally speaking, it is a question only of the system of knowledge. And when you begin to disseminate this system of control or development, universal development to everyone, then you have that level of control which is really universal. You see, where in general the universal level of realization of everything is. There is a level of universal realization of eternal life as a level of collective consciousness. When you begin to act independently, you begin to see how other people work. Actually, this looks like when you begin to act in such a manner. It is fairly simple to see how others act who have learned this. But you can see that in a man's soul there is knowledge, which by all means enables him to do this. That is, he has initial knowledge. And in order to pass your knowledge on to another person, it is sufficient just to open up a specific view for him, a perception of certain processes in this world. When he sees how God himself personally works, he begins to do the same thing. Communication of your personal and collective through a collective system of control, this is one control impulse. You come then actually to where your personal control impulse becomes universal, even when you are completing a private task. In this case, I transferred control on a logical level to a greater extent. When you begin to work on the level of development of the structure of the soul, then just the dissemination of your soul in the area of control, this is also a logic, but the logic of development of your soul to the area of information. You see, when God does control into some system, He actually is present there. The soul of God in any case exists in the same place as the soul of any man. This means there is action of the soul in a given place. But there is also the principle of existence of the soul of man in that place. Because initially, when God created the entire world and all the reality, He proceeded from Himself. Therefore, the soul of any man has infinite access to the level of macro-creation. At the moment of creating the soul, God showed on a specific level the system of entering the macro-access. Based on this, we can see, exactly in the applied, pragmatic aspect, how in the conditions of technogenization of society, when man is faced with specifically such a situation that he is forced to control the system of developing of some technical devices, the system of remote information areas, satellite systems which may be problematic from the standpoint of the possibility of starting some global catastrophe. although already now there is data that there will not be such a catastrophe. Nevertheless, we must be able to control technologically any technical system in any case and any systems which may be harmful to man. This means infinite development of civilization. In this case, the question is put in front of each man, whether his action is correct in order to ensure precisely eternal development. What kind of technology leads to the fact that eternal development will proceed simply harmoniously and creatively? Here we face the question of another choice of solutions in the system of macro information. You see, macro access is also the ability to single out a specific, local level of control from the macro information. That is, there is some information from telecasting, from newspapers, generally speaking, from the mass media. If we see in it an aspect of an infinite action of some level of development, we can fully control the infinite future, because the task of infinite development is actually also control of the infinite level of future development. For example, from my experience in the case of aircraft diagnostics, I made such a diagnosis for operational needs for entire level of development of exactly this aircraft up to the point where it would already be in a non-functional level, when the aircraft would be already obsolete due to its age and wear of the material. The next level is here. Control must be done essentially in order that the wear structure of the material was not accomplished in the system of information development. Man can perceive this element for himself. He is similar to God and can perceive any level where there is a level of some finiteness. Man can either restore this aircraft, extend its service life, or gain experience in how to make his personal development become infinite. That is, at any finite level, there is an element of opening an infinite plan. Any finite values, macro-galaxy, celestial sky, any control systems where there is a level of some locality contain an infinite system. And in order to give an accurate prognosis in the same specific aircraft, let us assume I diagnose the aircraft, one must know precisely the infinite phase of development from a specific period. When this infinite phase is visible, it is fairly simple to trace all the events. God made control in this way, and I do it so that control occurs from the level of omniscience. It is very simple to show the system of development in such a way that the action coming from God, this is an action also coming from man. That is, the simultaneousness of the action of God and man. Then it is the level of universal harmony that occurs here, and it is immediately apparent that this certain aircraft will simply not only have no defects, but it will fly calmly, at least without any accidents and even small ones, at all. A controlling status is immediately established. If the status of universal development is established in the control, what I said, people free of diseases, free of any problems, this is the level of reaching a specific information system. It is as if it is simply a transition, so to say. And when this level of transition is accomplished in such a way that the action of God, located in the physical body of man, and in doing so, it is apparent to everyone that the God alone can be located in the physical body of man, when God acts in conditions the same way man acts, to learn what problems man has. That is, formally he must look more closely at the details and make such a control system. In this case, in order to have eternal development, namely in the infinite plan,